The late afternoon sun streamed through the lace curtains in Evelyn Harper's small living room, casting delicate patterns across the worn beige sofa. She sat there, her favorite wool blanket draped across her knees, listening to the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. At 72, Evelyn had grown accustomed to a rhythm of life that felt both slow and strangely rich. One of her most sacred habits was the daily nap she took right after lunch. It wasn't long, 20, maybe 30 minutes, but it felt like slipping into another world, only to return sharper and somehow lighter. Her daughter Claire didn't understand it. "You nap every day like clockwork," Claire had teased just last week during a visit. "Isn't that just wasting daylight?" Evelyn smiled at the memory. Claire was 43, still full of restless energy, juggling work, family, and a calendar so overstuffed that the very idea of lying down in the middle of the day felt absurd to her. Evelyn had tried to explain how she could almost feel her brain clearing during those quiet moments, like sediment settling in clear water. But Claire had waved her off with a laugh. That afternoon, Evelyn prepared for her nap the way some people prepare for a ritual. She turned off the television, muted her phone, and allowed her body to sink into the sofa's soft embrace. The world outside dimmed as her breathing slowed, and soon her mind drifted, not into the deep chaos of dreams, but into something gentler, like floating on a calm lake. When she woke 25 minutes later, she noticed the difference immediately. Her memory was sharper. Words came more easily. The crossword puzzle waiting on the coffee table no longer felt like a mental marathon. She didn't know the science of it, not in detail, but she'd read somewhere that short naps could help the aging brain reset, almost like pressing a small refresh button. She believed it. After her nap, she felt less foggy. The sensation wasn't just mental, it was emotional, too. Problems seemed less daunting. She could recall old recipes without thumbing through cookbooks. Even her joints seemed less stiff. Across town, her neighbor Harold Simmons was experiencing the opposite. Harold was 75, but unlike Evelyn, he didn't nap. He prided himself on his discipline, his ability to power through the day without giving in to what he called old people habits. But Harold also had another streak of stubbornness. He sometimes stayed up far later than he should, especially when there was a late baseball game or a good detective novel on his nightstand. Yesterday, Harold had gotten caught in one of those nights. He'd been reading until well past midnight, then tossing and turning, his mind caught on an unfinished chapter. By the time dawn arrived, he'd barely had 3 hours of rest. He decided to skip sleep altogether, reasoning he could make it through one day and go to bed early that night. By 10 in the morning, Harold was already regretting his decision. His body felt heavy, as though he were wearing a coat made of lead. His eyes burned, his vision blurred at the edges, and his thoughts were sluggish, like they were trudging through knee-deep mud. He found himself standing in the kitchen, unsure why he'd gone there. His coffee tasted like nothing. By the afternoon, the effects were more than physical. Harold felt irritable, impatient with small things, like the sound of the neighbor's lawnmower or the faint ticking of his kitchen clock. His coordination was off, too. He fumbled with his keys, nearly tripped over a throw rug, and had to catch himself against the counter. He wasn't one to admit it, but he felt almost unsafe in his own home. Evelyn noticed his absence during their usual mailbox meeting. She decided to bring him some of the banana bread she'd baked that morning. When she knocked, Harold opened the door slowly, looking disheveled and unfocused. "You look like you've been through a storm," Evelyn said gently. "Didn't sleep last night," Harold grunted. "Figured I could push through." Evelyn handed him the warm loaf. "And how's that working for you?" He sighed. "Feels like my brain's wrapped in cotton. Can't remember half the things I meant to do today." She nodded, recognizing the signs. "Your brain's protesting, Harold. It's like a factory. It can't run at full speed without shutting down for maintenance. Even just one missed night makes everything harder." Harold shuffled toward the table, setting the bread down. "You take naps, right?" he asked, as though the thought had just occurred to him. "Every day, 20 minutes, keeps me sharp. Maybe I should try that. Right now, I feel like if I close my eyes for more than 5 seconds, I'll just collapse." Evelyn smiled. "There's no shame in it. Think of it as giving your brain a chance to sweep the floors and oil the gears." That evening, Harold decided to experiment. He set an alarm for 25 minutes, lay down on his recliner, and closed his eyes. At first, his mind was restless, drifting to the errands he hadn't finished. But eventually, the heaviness in his body took over, and he slipped into a shallow but surprisingly restorative sleep. When he woke, the fog wasn't gone entirely, but it had thinned. He felt less irritable, more able to focus. The ticking of the clock no longer grated on his nerves. He even felt steady enough to reheat a bowl of soup without spilling it. Over the next few weeks, Harold began incorporating short naps into his routine. Not every day, but often enough to notice changes. His memory slips became less frequent. His mood improved. And though he'd never admit it in so many words, he began to feel a little more like Evelyn after one of her afternoon rests. Sharper, lighter, more alive. The two of them fell into a quiet companionship built around these small habits. Sometimes, Evelyn would wake from her nap and see Harold sitting on his porch, eyes brighter than before, sipping tea. Other days, Harold would wave to her after his own short rest, calling out, "That was better than coffee!" Evelyn understood something that Harold was just beginning to realize. The body doesn't care how proud you are about staying awake. It has its own language, and it will demand rest whether you grant it willingly or not. Naps, especially as the years pile on, are not a sign of weakness. They're a tool, a way to keep the gears turning smoothly for as long as possible. One bright autumn afternoon, Harold stopped by with a question. "Do you ever think about what would happen if you stopped napping altogether?" he asked. Evelyn chuckled. "I imagine I'd feel a lot like you did that day you didn't sleep, slow, foggy, and more than a little grumpy." "Exactly," Harold said. "I think I used to underestimate how much the brain needs downtime. I thought skipping sleep was just about being tired. Didn't realize it was like shutting down parts of yourself." They sat together on Evelyn's porch, the crisp air carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. Evelyn thought about how the world around them was always moving faster, neighbors rushing from one task to another, television news never stopping, phones buzzing endlessly. It was easy to forget that, inside, the brain had limits. "Most people don't realize," she said softly, "that resting isn't just stopping, it's rebuilding." The sun dipped lower, and Evelyn felt the familiar weight in her eyelids, a gentle signal. She excused herself and headed inside, ready for her afternoon retreat. Harold, watching her go, thought about how far he'd come from the man who scoffed at naps. Later, as he settled into his own recliner, he understood something Evelyn had known for years. Giving the brain a moment to breathe wasn't just about feeling better for the rest of the day. It was an act of care, a quiet promise to himself that he'd keep the machinery running as long as he could. When he woke from his short nap, the world felt clearer, the edges sharper. He picked up the phone and called Evelyn, just to tell her about the crispness of the air, the way the light was hitting the trees outside his window. And she listened, smiling, because she knew exactly what he meant.